Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor. Thank you for your continued support. Today I'm back at it with another Nancy Drew fandom crowdsourcing experiment. Lately I've been thinking about the replay value of each of the Nancy Drew games, and wondering which games improve after replays and which perhaps deteriorate. I don't know about you, but as an avid Nancy Drew PC game fan, the biggest question that I get from the uninitiated is, why would you replay a mystery game if you already know how it ends? Now I have my personal response to this question, but it got me thinking. Do other Nancy Drew fans replay the games? And if so, why? And how does replaying the games change the experience of each individual entry in the series? To answer these questions, I posted surveys on the channel Discord, Instagram, and Community tab. If you'd like to participate in these kinds of videos in the future, all of the channel's socials are linked in the description box down below. So, what were the results after 167 responses? First, fans voted on how often they replay the Nancy Drew games with 6 options. I've never replayed them. I've replayed a few of them. I've replayed most of them at least once. I've replayed most of them multiple times. I've replayed all of them at least once. I replay all of them regularly. I fall into that final category of replaying all of the games regularly, and it seems like a sizable portion of fellow detectives agree with me. 25% of fellow detectives replay all of the games regularly, while 12% have replayed all of them at least once. The largest category includes fellow detectives who have replayed most of the games multiple times, with 35% of respondents agreeing with this statement. 15% of fellow detectives have replayed most of the games at least once, and 12% have replayed a few of them. Only 1% of fellow detectives never replay the Nancy Drew games. If we break this down further, over half of the fan base, 72% in fact, seem to enjoy replaying the Nancy Drew games. And why is this the case? I allowed respondents to share why they feel compelled to replay the Nancy Drew games. I noticed 5 distinct themes. The primary reason reported for replaying the Nancy Drew games is that they're nostalgic. Revisiting beloved games from our childhood brings such a boost of dopamine, so I wholeheartedly agree with this reason for replays. Reliving those moments where you felt victorious or clever or brave or cool for the first time can be incredibly comforting and therapeutic. The second most common reason that the fandom reports replaying the games is for the challenge of the puzzles. Whether they're good at the puzzles already and just enjoy going back to them for the brain boost, or if they're trying to get better at the puzzles as a fun sort of self-challenge, fellow detectives seem to love getting their brains going with fun, exciting puzzles, and I wholeheartedly agree. Third, fellow detectives reported that they replay the Nancy Drew games simply because they're fun. Enjoying conversations with characters, exploring the different twists and turns of the stories, and living vicariously through Nancy all add up to a fun experience. What more do we need? The fourth most commonly reported reason for replaying the Nancy Drew games was because they provide comfort and a relaxing space to escape from the pressures of real life for a time. Detectives reported enjoying the atmosphere and environments of the games, immersing themselves in cozy locations and surrounding themselves with the glorious soundtracks to reduce anxiety and enjoy some chill time. Finally, fellow detectives report that they enjoy replaying the games specifically to try and find new things in them that they hadn't found before. I certainly do this too. It's incredibly exciting to uncover a conversation that you've never had, a hidden puzzle that you didn't know about, or an optional clue that you had always missed. It's also quite fun to replay a mystery knowing the story, because then putting the pieces together and finding all of the sneaky little hints that you hadn't seen before is so satisfying. I unequivocally agree with all of these reasons for replaying the games, and it was so fun to see all of your answers. It truly seems like the Nancy Drew games are a safe space for so many of us, whether we're looking for a challenge or some comfort. They can provide both, and for that reason alone, I'll always love them. And now, with all of this juicy replay knowledge in our back pockets, let's get into the nitty-gritty of which Nancy Drew games hold up after replays and which ones do not, according to votes from all of you fellow detectives. I was incredibly excited to see the results of this quiz because I have my own opinions and was so curious to see all of yours. Spoiler alert, we have a lot of similar opinions, my friends. Let's start with the games that improved on replays for fellow detectives. The question specifically asked, which Nancy Drew games did you not like much during your first playthrough, but then liked more after replaying them? Every single game within the series got at least one vote, but I'm going to focus on the ones that got significantly more than the others. The games that detectives said improved upon replays are The Final Scene, Curse of Blackmore Manor, Trail of the Twister, Alibi in Ashes, The Deadly Device, White Wolf of Icicle Creek, and, with the most votes, Legend of the Crystal Skull and Secret of the Scarlet Hand. I think these results are fascinating, and I have some theories. First, most of these games are definitely puzzle-heavy. Curse of Blackmore Manor, Trail of the Twister, The Deadly Device, White Wolf of Icicle Creek, Legend of the Crystal Skull, and to a certain extent, Secret of the Scarlet Hand are all chock full of puzzles. I hypothesize that, on a first playthrough, these games may be difficult and require more outside support, like walkthroughs or strategy guides, in order to make it through. Or at the very least, more hair-pulling and trial and error. When this is the case, a detective's focus is more often pulled towards the puzzles, and their energy is more frequently expended on the act of solving the puzzles. This can distract from any other elements that may make a Nancy Drew game compelling, such as the story, the characters, the location, and the ambiance. Because, while all of these games are puzzle-heavy, they also all have some pretty solid stories to back them up. Except maybe Trail of the Twister, though I can definitely see an argument for that one having a stronger story than I often give it credit for. So, upon replays, when detectives have already been through the rigmarole of the puzzles before and now know what to do, their mental energy is freed up, and detectives can now focus on all of the other wonderful elements that a game brings to the table. All of these games have, at the very least, decent plots, and all of them have unique, interesting locations to explore. I think it makes a lot of sense why their beauty may come through more upon replays. As for Alibi in Ashes and The Final Scene, I think these two games may have an opposite sort of reaction. Both of these games are on the more simple and faster side of the spectrum than other Nancy Drew games. On a first playthrough, I could easily see them coming across as too simple, even a bit boring, or lacking in exciting gameplay elements or challenges. However, upon replays, I think the nuances of each of these games are more likely to shine through. The character conversations in Alibi in Ashes actually offer up a lot of replay value, because they're all slightly different depending on who is doing the investigating, Bess, George, or Ned. There's also a pretty compelling underlying narrative in Alibi in Ashes about the pros and cons of living in a small town where everyone knows everyone's secrets and holds grudges. Similarly, the drama of The Final Scene can become so much more powerful after replays, when players can see how all of the little details and nuances play into the culprit's motivation from the very beginning. It's one of those mysteries where we literally had all the clues from the start, but couldn't piece them together at the time. Seeing that in retrospect is fascinating. So I definitely agree with the votes made by fellow detectives. If I were to take the survey myself, I would personally vote for Secret of Shadow Ranch, The Haunted Carousel, and Danger by Design. These each got a handful of votes as well. For me, Shadow Ranch improved significantly after I replayed it, because I was able to focus more on the historical subplot between Francis and Dirk than I had initially. The depth and complexity of their story is really something else, and I was able to appreciate it so much more with each successful replay. For The Haunted Carousel, the first time I played it, I thought it was way too easy, and I finished it so quickly that I was honestly pretty disappointed. However, after replaying it, I've come to love it for what it is, a sweet, light little game with actually some pretty neat character conversations and an exciting ending. Finally, for Danger by Design, I was really confused by the intermingled plots the first time that I played and really frustrated by some of the puzzles. Now that I know what's going on after so many replays, I've come to really enjoy the feeling of wandering around France. I've also been able to focus more on the Noisette Tornade storyline, and while I still wish it was more fleshed out, it's been much more fun to enjoy through replays. But what of the other end of things? Which Nancy Drew games deteriorated on replays for fellow detectives? The survey question asked, which Nancy Drew games did you like during your first playthrough, but then liked less after replaying them? Every game in the series got at least one vote, but the votes for this category seemed much more consistent as a whole. As for the ones that got significantly more votes than the others, fellow detectives chose Danger by Design, White Wolf of Icicle Creek, Trail of the Twister, The Silent Spy, Labyrinth of Lies, Secrets Can Kill Remastered, and with the most votes, Creature of Kapu Cave and Ransom of the Seven Ships. Now, wait a minute, Wizard Kitten, you may be saying. Trail of the Twister and White Wolf of Icicle Creek were games that people liked more after replays, and now you're saying that people liked them less after replays? So the votes suggest. What's even more interesting is that the percentage of fellow detectives who voted for these two games in each category is roughly the same, right around 15% for both liking and disliking the game more after replays. I think this comes down to the fact that both of these games are fairly divisive within the series. Some detectives enjoy them quite a bit, and others really don't, and opinions following replays probably become even stronger and more solidified. Both Trail of the Twister and White Wolf of Icicle Creek are incredibly puzzle-heavy. In both games, there may be some puzzles you learn to love, and some that you learn to hate. Sometimes a single puzzle can ruin the whole game for you, like catching mice or fixing the transmission in Trail of the Twister, or Fox and Geese in White Wolf of Icicle Creek, which is my hypothesis for why these games also show up in this category. Either way, I think it's incredibly interesting. I also think it's interesting to note the pattern that emerges when we look at the rest of the games that fellow detectives say they liked less following playthroughs, particularly The Silent Spy, Labyrinth of Lies, Creature of Kapu Cave, and Ransom of the Seven Ships. These 4 games have multiple elements that may make them seem strong on a first playthrough. They're all adventurous games set in exciting locations. They're all puzzle-heavy and therefore on the longer, more challenging side of things. On the surface, these games may seem pretty fun on the first go. However, I propose that all 4 of these games have particularly weak plots, which likely become significantly more obvious on replays. While the beautiful pink beaches and exciting mini-games of Ransom of the Seven Ships may be fun at first, the complete and utter lack of suspects becomes glaringly obvious on replays. While the Kate Drew narrative and spy theme brings some adventure and intrigue on a first playthrough, the messiness of the plot, the complete lack of follow-through on multiple plot lines, the superficiality of the locations, and the poor motivations of the suspects are all much more noticeable when you replay The Silent Spy. Labyrinth of Lies and Creature of Kapu Cave both also suffer from weak storylines that the flashy Greek sets and Hawaiian jungles just can't compensate for when we look closer. I think this argument holds for Danger by Design as well. Though it's a game that I enjoyed more on replays, I definitely understand how the weaker and conflicting storylines become all too clear on replays, hampering the experience for fellow detectives. As far as Secrets Can Kill Remastered, I think this comes down to the remastered version of a nostalgic game seeming really neat and impressive on a first playthrough compared to how it holds up later on. The original Secrets Can Kill was a beast to play, with 2 discs, 2-dimensional characters, useless phone characters, and minimal puzzles. The remastered version improved on all of these things and made this game accessible to players who had never been able to play it before. This alone would make it exciting to play for the first time. I think the addition of so many cookies celebrating the series is also really fun to see initially. But this game really doesn't have much in the way of replay value to support it. All of these new things are exciting at first, but the substance of the game after replays really isn't there. If I were to vote for this category, I would vote for several of the same games, particularly Labyrinth of Lies and The Silent Spy, for the reasons that I specified previously. I also would vote for The Phantom of Venice and The Haunting of Casamola, which did get a pretty fair chunk of votes from fellow detectives. Both of these games hooked me initially with their exciting settings and beautiful music, but the stories for both become a bit less compelling when I replayed them. Phantom of Venice feels too structured and linear to me, since we're told what to do at each step, which is nice at first, but feels restricting and boring on replays. Haunting of Casamola used to be one of my top 5 favorite games for its music, setting, and scare factor. But the puzzles are often frustrating to relive. I'm looking at you, Chemicals puzzle. And the unrealistic story elements can become rather ridiculous the more that I look at them. So, there you have it, fellow detectives. A crowdsourcing analysis of the Nancy Drew PC games, how we replay them, why we replay them, and the replay value of them. Thank you so much for participating in this survey and for nerding out about the Nancy Drew games with me. It's my absolute favorite thing to do, and I'm so grateful for this community of fellow detectives. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. I would love to hear what you think of the results and how or why the games changed for you after replays. Additionally, if you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.